Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Hi, my name is Ollie Schwaga, and this is 10 Points to Ponder, where we like to talk about all the things that get you canceled: race, politics, Jesus, and manhood. Today, I'm going to try something different and just film from my living room and talk about a topic and several topics that I've been talking about throughout the course of these videos. You might as well call this like a final exam or an overview of the very purpose behind this channel and why I talk about race, politics, Jesus, and manhood. Those things are what the culture is trying to pervert and warp. And so today I want to talk about warped priorities, how our culture has things so wrong and out of whack, and what the proper order of things should be for the sake of human flourishing. Because this is such a large topic and there are so many aspects and so many things I want to say, I've just written down a ton of notes, 4 pages of notes. I'm going to go through these notes. Pardon me if I'm just reading to you, but I just really want to get these thoughts out as quick and concise as possible. And so, point 1, family structure. God is supposed to lead the father, who leads the wife, who leads children. Too many fathers are led by other interests in this world, living very passively and lacking any intentionality to create an order for human flourishing. Many men are led by pornography and thus unable to engage with their wives healthily or their children because of this endless cycle of sin, shame, isolation, and back to sin. Too many wives are led by TikTok videos and their friends who seek to exert power and control over their personal lives and over their husbands through manipulation or nagging or simply lies and secrecy. This is one of the biggest, the foundational warped priority in this culture. Too many children listen to their friends rather than their parents, taking the advice of fools and disregarding wisdom. Point 2, warped priority, husband and wife relationships, and the importance of that coming before children. We need to prioritize marriage. Too many couples have placed the children above the marriage and put all their time into endless games and clubs and this faulty competition with others, with other parents, in regards to which child is doing better. My child is in advanced kindergarten, and my child is in this club, and this club, and this club, and no one seeks to ask what is going on with the actual child. And you're doing all of this to the detriment of your actual marriage. The most valuable thing that a couple can do to align their priorities rightly for their children is to prioritize their relationship and their marriage so that it can withstand the temptations of this culture and children can see what commitment and fidelity look like. Point 3, another warped priority, choice over reality. We have a transgender debate in this country, and the idea of forcing others to live according to how I identify myself. For example, an anorexic person comes into a doctor, and does the doctor then decide that, well, since you identify as someone who needs to lose more weight, though you're only 80 pounds, we need to give you more diet exercises, and we need to give you some weight loss pills, and we need to just help you take those extra pounds off so that you'll feel like you're at a healthy weight? Or do we recognize it for what it is when the anorexic comes into the doctor and says, I need to lose weight? We say, oh, that's a symptom of a mental health situation. And so we treat it through counseling rather than agreeing to further harm your health or even mutilate you in order to help you conform to the reality that's in your mind. Imagine an anorexic person getting gastric bypass surgery because although they're 80 pounds, they feel they're still too thin. Point 4, how our priorities are warped. We prioritize race over humanity. Pronouns and choice operate regarding sexual identity, but not racial identity. To racial identity, to society, is fixed and immovable. If you're one color, you must conform to cultural and political beliefs of that culture. But this only applies to non-whites, because if you're white, you can essentially be anything that you want. You can be a stoner, you could be grunge, you can be gothic, you can be hip hop, you can be almost anything that you want. But if you're a person of color, you have to conform into neatly defined categories and characteristics. The difference, however, between skin color is far less of a difference than the difference between males and females when you look biologically. And yet, for one, we allow people to identify however they want, and the other, it's fixed and deemed immutable. Point 5, a warped priority is that we prize pleasure over fidelity. What I mean by this, God has designed marriage as the sole means of expression of sexual desire. Society has warped this so that sex outside of marriage is actually the norm. Heterosexual sex has the chance to produce children, which, by the way, is another reason why skin color is much less of a difference between humans than gender, because definitely two males cannot produce a baby, neither can two females. It takes a male and a female. Anyway, because of the high number of children born out of wedlock, society has become accepting of this warped family culture and structure, calling it an equally valid alternative. All who are concerned with social problems and disparities will look everywhere else than this elephant in the room. When 75% of black children are born out of wedlock, it should be no wonder the educational, criminal justice, or achievement disparities that exist. When you have no father showing you what it is to love women, to respect others, the value of hard work, it's no wonder the culture and music reflect self-hatred, violence, and misogyny. We need to get back to proper alignment of priorities. Marriage, then children. Marriage, then children. Number 6, warped priority. We've all felt this. The priority of safety over freedom. Those who prize safety over freedom are willing to do harm to the economy, people's mental health, the physical health of others, and the functioning of society, all in the interest of safety. We just saw this with lockdowns and nonsensical, unscientific health measures undertaken to prevent something that the vast majority of people who get will catch and recover from. This is the nanny state that shows its love by smothering and suffocating those it purports to care for. Government's job is not to keep us safe. It's to provide an infrastructure, a commonwealth. If you read Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes, he puts it this way: in civil society, every man lays down his right to all things, to be contented with so much liberty against all men as he would allow all other men against himself. But that's it. Those are the limits to liberty. He should have freedom to do the things that he wants. Understand that we don't have a right to all things, but society should be structured in such a way that we have freedom in most things. The greatest freedom is the freedom to succeed or fail as our circumstances or abilities or our God would allow. Which leads me to the next point. Point 7. This is the biggest warped priority. We have substituted government for God. From the beginning of this country, we have sought to limit governmental power through a federal system that allows for local control over the affairs of people's lives. The reason for this is that power concentrated in the hands of too few will often lead to tyranny. Instead, we believe that government's role is to do the things we cannot do for ourselves, and that each person should primarily rely on God and their family for their well-being rather than the government. The age-old battle we fight today is the conflict of visions that Thomas Sowell talked about. Either one believes God orders and directs our affairs and lives, and that this material world is not our eternal home, and that all men are flawed and sinful and corruptible. Or, on the other hand, one believes that this world is all there is, that there are a certain set of people who are so enlightened and noble that they are capable of leading us into a worldly utopia. If only we lay down all of our rights and obey them. Point 8. Another big topic and warped priority that has just happened recently. We are messing with language. We've substituted equity for equality. Bear with me because I'm going to talk a lot about this topic. This shift is meant to place the responsibility for the advancement of black people upon the shoulders of white people. This is what critical race theory posits: that every disparity experienced by blacks is due to a system that marginalizes them due to morally irrelevant characteristics like their skin color. The three primary culprits used by these same purveyors of this ideology is they'll talk about slavery, Jim Crow laws, and redlining. That's the whole reason for everything that's wrong with society and why there are disparities. The solution that they posit is equity. Essentially, we dismantle the meritocracy and provide benefits to others solely on the basis of race. That we enforce equity through racial preferences and quotas. Ergo, 13% of each company should be black people, whether blacks have the qualifications or motivations to enter into these fields. Basically, the argument is that since blacks have been so scarred as to be helpless due to their racial trauma, benevolent white people have to place them into positions and uplift their contributions, irrespective of ability. It's like someone hands you a drawing, a child hands you a picture, a stick figure that he drew in a crayon, and you say, "Oh, that's marvelous. That is great. Let's go put that in the museum." Let's put that right next to the Mona Lisa, right? Because you're a child, and it doesn't matter whether there's actual beauty or whether you've made an accomplishment. We just want to patronize you and pat you on the back of the head, and we're gonna place you right there, because that's our penance. This produces a sense of moral superiority on the parts of whites as they endure the sacrifice of hiring a black person with inferior skills as their penance for whiteness. But it also promotes a loss of agency on the parts of blacks. There is no freedom or individuality. You are simply a member of a group deserving of charity, no matter your individual talents or ability. Any benefits you receive from society are not earned, but simply a form of reparations for the harm suffered by prior generations. Your skin color now is your primary qualification, and outside of that, you are not unique. Equity randomizes the black person for white moral absolution. Equality is determined by God. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, right? In Genesis, it said that God made us in his image, male and female. Equality says that we all have the same intrinsic value and worth and moral agency. Why do I believe that? Because we shall all appear before God to give an account for the things that we have done. You're not going to be able to stand up there and say, oh, it's because of slavery, Jim Crow, and redlining why I sinned. Equality is agency. Whether I am black or white, I have to look at myself, my values, my sphere of influence, and ask whether I'm doing what is right or wrong, and whether I have maximized the opportunities that God has given me. Equality is the very charge of God when he said that man should tend and cultivate the things that he created, and that everyone will give an account for the gifts and talents that he has received. Critical race theory and equity seem to provide an excuse for disparities. God does not. Point 9. We have prioritized system over consequence. Let me explain. At the core of the CRT argument is a lack of critical thought regarding whether disparities are a result of systemic problems or simply consequences of cultural features. We want to say that it's some nebulous system, some pie in the sky, something you can't actually touch. It's just a force that's creating disparities. For instance, are Asian and Indian people just smarter than other people? Or is this a consequence of culture that prizes education and academic excellence? If we make the genetic argument, we would need then again to argue for inherent racial superiority, which has been the textbook definition of racism before they started making up new ways to be racist by just being white. When we blame disparities on systems, then it follows that we must find either the policies or people who are perverting justice. In many cases, the culprit is nowhere to be found because we are uncomfortable with saying that disparities are consequences of counterproductive behavior. We ignore black and brown immigrants in this country who share the same skin color as the descendants of slaves and have far better outcomes educationally and societally. Often the argument of selection is applied, stating that those with greater initiative are more likely to immigrate to another country. But this argument belies the fact that these immigrants often come and work lower paying jobs, and sometimes even remain in those jobs for decades. We ignore the results of family structure, delayed gratification, and hard work. We ignore the positive consequences. Instead, we want to talk about systems and all the things we can't control. At least the discussion of consequences would result in self-examination and improvement. The system discussion is one in which society and structures bear all the blame for inequities and inequalities. We saw it in the summer of 2020. This would be my summary of the summer of 2020. The people, they gathered in the streets seeking to strike one final blow against systemic injustice. But without any actual policies or processes to turn their anger towards, they figured, just burn everything. Systemic racism, no doubt, must be somewhere in the ashes. Point 10. This is a warped priority. We have substituted our desires for God's desire. When we see this world upside down, the reason is that we have forsaken God and sought to make ourselves God. All of humanity is encapsulated in Romans 1, where it says, yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God, nor would they give him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. As a result, their minds became dark and confused, and instead of worshiping the glorious, ever-living God, they worshiped idols made to look like mere people and birds and animals and reptiles. At its core, when you substitute your desire for God's desire, you have essentially made yourself God, and anything goes. We're in an anything goes society, especially because of that. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. My name is Ollie Schwaga, and this has been 10 Points to Ponder.